This episode of the New Medical Nomads podcast is brought to you by Nomadicare. Now, personally, I love Nomadicare. I've used Nomadicare, and I recommend the company to all new travelers. What Nomadicare does is it takes the fear out of getting set up with a bad recruiter, which is the biggest fear that you have jumping into this journey. So they sit down, they interview recruiters, they vet them, get them on a list, and then provide them to you as a free service, as a free recruiter matchmaking service in order to get you started on your journey. Now, usually you only get 2 recruiters going through Nomadicare, but being a listener of the show, you can get 3. So this is how it's going to work. You go to nomadicare.com/Dylan. You will get set up with 3 recruiters to be on your dream team, as well as a guide to get you started on your journey.
Hey Nomads, Dylan coming at you from Silicon Valley. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the New Medical Nomads podcast. I am your host, Dr. Dylan Callier, and today we are talking about goals and the means to acquire those goals. I think this is an important topic to talk about because it's very easy to feel like you're running without a direction. When you start feeling lonely on the road, you start thinking, why am I even doing this in the first place? It is very likely that you will hit a section of like, what am I doing? And for me personally, having goals makes me feel like I have an inline direction of what I am trying to accomplish, or at least an idea of where I'm trying to be headed. So it's comforting to have an A to B linear idea of where you're going to be going versus kind of haphazardly doing whatever in order to have that A to C to G to H to X to Y to B for your journey. The types of goals that you have are going to reflect on the decisions that you make. And if you make decisions that don't align with your goals, you're not going to feel very good about them. And so personally, I take usually monthly times to sit down and figure out and realign my goals and remember what I am doing, why am I doing it. At most, I'll wait 2 months if I'm busy, but writing them down, having them somewhere for you to look at, figuring out what it is that you want out of life is going to make you feel so much better and is going to make your decisions so much clearer when it comes to those hard decisions to make. So long-term goals as a traveler can be very hard to sit down and figure out. I know some of those typical job interviews you have, where do you see yourself in 15 years? It's like, shoot, lady, I don't even know where I'm going to be in 5 years. I don't know where I'm going to be in 1 year. I don't know where I'm going to be in 3 months. I have a general idea of what I want to accomplish in those amount of times, but as for like geographical location, what my life's going to look like, I have no idea. And that's the exciting part, right? And it's one of those ways to avoid monotony. So a lot of us enjoy that for a short period of time. Some of us, for you veterans out there, enjoy it for a long period of time. But sitting down and knowing what your goals are is going to make those decisions that we'll be talking about here in a moment so much easier when you come across maybe something, an opportunity that comes up, or more something that is a time consumption rather than an actual opportunity comes up. And keeping the big picture in mind is going to help you make those decisions. So I have a couple case studies here, actually a few, of real persons that I've had conversations with that are out there traveling. Some of you might recognize yourself when I start talking about you, especially this last one here. But for the first case study, we're talking about the traveling nurse that wants to see the world. The second candidate, the second case study, is going to be the traveling therapist that wants to open up her own clinic, her own business. And then the last, just to keep it fun, the traveler that wants to find herself a rich man to marry, quote unquote. I might have had to paraphrase that just because of some of the details involved with that. But all these case studies will remain nameless, and I think you guys are going to enjoy this. So going to the travel nurse that wants to see the world. That is going to your why and your goals. And I highly suggest going back to the episode with Brandon Leaker talking about values and how those need to kind of create the goals. So the goals that you create and the why behind your intention is going to affect the types of contracts that you get. Now, keep in mind that for this current market, not everybody has the variability that they would like with the contracts. Currently, PTs are doing awesome. PTAs, codas, OTs, you're having a hard time right now. So your flexibility with your choices is going to depend on the market, but you still want to have your goals in mind for when those decisions do come up. The travel nurse who wants to see the world, he or she is going to take the contracts in really cool areas and places that they want to go. Now, the other part of this podcast is making sure that you stay online with that goal, with the overarching goal, and don't focus on the means or don't get stuck on the means. And so if this travel nurse, if her goal is to see the world and she keeps taking contracts in really cool but low paying areas, she's only going to see the United States. That would be getting stuck in the means. She is using this opportunity, going to multiple different contracts throughout the year to see these awesome places. But if that's her ticket for the flexibility in order to go to another country and see the world, if she doesn't take a high-paying job that would also allow her to fund that trip, she's going to get stuck in the means of acquiring the goal. So for those that are traveling for location, if you want to see the world, there might come a time where you have a contract that maybe isn't in the most sexy place to go in the United States. Maybe it's in the middle of rural Kansas. Maybe it's in the middle of rural Missouri. You might have to take that. If it's a really high-paying job with a really low area of cost of living, and that one contract is able to fund you for 6 months somewhere, that would be worth it. Might be tough, but it would be worth it. Going down the line, the traveling therapist that wants to open up her own practice. For this one, it's going to, for the traveling nurse that might want to travel the world, the setting might not mean that much to her. As a traveling therapist, if you want to open up an outpatient clinic, taking contracts in a acute care hospital might not reflect your goals the best. As somebody that wants to open up a clinic, you want to see other clinics. The good thing about travel is that we get to see very many different contracts throughout the year, very many different clinics throughout the year. And if you take a setting that's not in an area that you want to open up, you're going to miss out on all those business lessons that you get to see at those facilities that you work at. One of the great things for those entrepreneurial mindset travelers for going to see these different clinics, these different facilities, if you're wanting to be in the management position or open your own business, we get to see what works at each and every different location, or more importantly, what doesn't work. There's a reason they need us. And so if you show up and you see bad management style, you get to learn from that. You get to learn from somebody else's mistake. That's amazing. That means you're not going to make the same mistake, especially if it's a tough contract and you have to grind through it. That's going to make you so much more skilled and aligned with your goal. Now, if you are 5 years out from opening up your own clinic, your decisions are going to be different than somebody that's wanting to open it up within the next year, within the next 2 years. In that case, they might want to take one of those higher paying contracts in a hospital in order to fund that first year of business. So it all depends on the goals. If you are a new grad therapist, new grad travel therapist, and you want to open up your own clinic, that experience in the hospital might be worth it. because then you get to see what the patients are going through for 3 months, and you get to see all the post-ops. And so if you open up an outpatient clinic, you know what that looks like from A to Z. Most schools try to push that onto students so that you see the continuum of care from A to Z. But not all schools do. And sometimes with the shortage of clinics that are allowing students to come in and work, sometimes you don't get that experience. And so this would be a great time for you to earn that experience. So if you're playing a long-term game, again, always play the long-term game. If you're 5 years from opening up your own clinic and you want that experience, you can go for it. But if you're really short to opening up your own clinic and you don't need the cash, it would be better for you to learn those business ideas, those business lessons through somebody else's mistakes a year to 2 before you opened up your own clinic. Now, this last case study, the traveler that wants to find herself a man to marry is more of a behavior goal. So this individual would want to go to probably not rural areas like my hometown where there's only 2,000 people. Your selection of individuals are not going to be that good. Might want to try and get closer to cities. But if this individual doesn't get out of the house and actually actively tries to seek out, first of all, network, friendships, so that something would turn into relationships, you're not going to achieve your goal. And I'm not a big fan of bars. I'm a very introverted person. But if this individual wanted to go to bars to try and find the rich man, it's going to depend on which bars you go to. You were going to want to go to the fancy ones with the cocktails and the umbrellas and the drink, not the dive bars where I'm thinking the own bar that I grew up in with all the old men smoking, talking politics, talking football, maybe whatever else is going on in the small town. Is going to depend on where you want to go. Now, if you are a traveler out there wanting to make more friends, it can be very lonely on this journey. And there's plenty of social apps that you can use, but I like those ideas of actually getting involved with the community. So going and volunteering, if there's a bunch of big volunteer groups, you can go out there, Red Cross, whatever, or something that's going to teach you a skill like building a house. That's cool. Do that. Meet friends. Go out with the friends. Meet the friends of friends, and your network will grow. Paid events like dance class. Getting partnered up with somebody. You're gonna, you're making a fool out of yourself in front of somebody else making a fool out of yourself. It's pretty hard not to have a bond over those types of events. If you are into martial arts, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, if you are a lady looking for a date, usually the jiu-jitsu classes, it's probably changed since I've done it, but usually jiu-jitsu classes are mostly dudes. So finding events that, one, you get to learn how to defend yourself. That's awesome. Congratulations, you're now a badass. And then 2, you're growing your network, you're growing your friends. You're getting somebody to go go along with you on that wedding that you're preparing to go to. I'm doing this goal as tongue in cheek. This individual really isn't such a passive person, but it's just something to add a little bit of humor to this podcast. And just simple hiking. I've met a lot of friends hiking, and I remember going to Angel Island in the Bay, and you're boating out on this ferry, sitting next to somebody. Usually people go hiking in groups, but for whatever reason, this individual sat next to me. She was going to solo hike. It's like, hey, do you have anybody to hike with? Is it cool if I stick with you? And so we kind of hiked a little bit, and then she had a shorter schedule, so she had to go off, and then I did my usual 6 to 7 hour hike because I'm just gazing and looking at all the sights. But it's very easy to meet people on hikes as you're walking up, even in groups of people, saying, hey, I'm new to the area, would love to stick with you guys if that's okay. People usually like tag-alongs. People are usually very open, especially in social events. So that is the goal. And then getting stuck on the means would be never leaving the home, going on these contracts, feeling lonely, kind of going into that negative feedback loop of, oh, I can't find anyone, I'm a traveler. Second of all, if you are looking for friends, the traveler groups might be a traveler in your area. If you're in the Bay Area, there's a ton of travelers out here. If you're in California, anywhere, there's probably a ton of travelers around you, or any city, really. So post in one of those big Facebook groups for nurses or for therapists or new medical nomads. We got our own Facebook group, but that would be a way for you to meet your goals. So those are all just examples. I want you, after stopping listening to this podcast, to sit down and figure out what your goals are. It doesn't have to be a location of where you're going to be, but what are you heading towards? Are you going to own your own place? Are you trying to pay off student debt? Maybe you want to try and get those higher paying locations, higher paying contracts. But at the same time, it's not as straightforward. Obviously, the individual looking for a rich man to marry is not going to want to marry an a-hole. And so when you're thinking of these goals, usually the three that people think of are, where do you want to be? Where do you want to be in the States when you take a contract? Money, how much do you want to get paid? And setting. So those three can kind of balance each other, but you need to pick one. You need to pick one that is the most important thing for that contract. And it doesn't always have to be the money. It doesn't always have to be the setting. Sometimes if you're grinding and you're doing contract after contract with that pays well, but it's not in a setting that you enjoy, you're going to need a refresher. And you might want to go back to the setting that you're used to, so you don't lose those skills. So when you do stop this whole traveling thing, that whenever you decide to settle down, if you're going to work at a clinic, if you're going to work at a hospital, you still have those skills so that you're not just kind of stepping in. And then that will also make your resume more desirable for those hiring you. So just keeping the goals in mind, it's not always cut and dry. And the goals might change per contract. Again, for the traveler that wants to see the world, might do 2 contracts in a row that are really cool in really cool areas. And then for that third one, if you're going to take time off to go, see the other side of the world, you might want to have to go to somewhere that's going to pay really nice so that you can afford to take those months off or those weeks off, however long that you're going to do your journeys and see the world. But everybody, thank you so much for listening. I really enjoy doing these podcasts and these solo ones. And they're a little bit shorter, but I usually don't ramble on too much on these. So if you see these posts about, if you like what we talked about today, any likes, hearts, comments, shares, all increases the engagement of the group, allowing more people to see it, which is ultimately the goal of this podcast, is to help other individuals. So the more that people see it, the more that we can help. But if you were looking for the next episode of the New Medical Nomads podcast, you can find the official launches on New Medical Nomads podcast Facebook page. If you have any questions for the group, looking for friends, about goals, about what to do for this next contract, you can find the answers at New Medical Nomads Facebook group. And if you want early access to the episodes, you can go to Spotify, YouTube, iTunes. We're pretty much everywhere now. So any of your favorite podcast apps, you can pretty much find us on it. But everybody, have good luck setting your goals. Remember to do this frequently. I do it every month, so I don't feel like I'm just running in a hamster wheel, that I know where I'm going. Put it somewhere you can see it. Make sure that all your decisions are going to be aligning with that goal. If something comes up and it's not aligned with that goal, you should say no. If your job is if your goal is to go out and go on these awesome adventures, and there's a side hustle gig that drains all of your time out of the day, it's not for you. Say no, pass it on. Instead of being opportunities, they are distractions, distracting us from our true goals. So set the goal right after this podcast, put it somewhere you can see it, review it every month, and travelers, nomads, everybody, have safe travels.